welcome, my fellow cool but rudes, to Unrepentant Geeking, the show where a geek can be a geek. And I'm here this week to review the newest incarnation of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles on TV, so let's start by talking about Teen Titans Go. No, I promise you I'm going somewhere with this. Just stick with me, it's all going to make sense, I promise. So, for those of you who have been living, under a rock, because this show is pretty popular, Teen Titans Go premiered back in April 2013, and it's a divisive show, to say the very least. The idea behind Go was pretty simple, at least in concept. Take the popular characters of the Teen Titans, as expressed in a previous cartoon series from several years previous to 2013, and do a comedic spin on it, playing off a couple of earlier shorts from that other series that themselves were a bit more super deformed, Teen Titans being very heavily influenced by anime, and more comedic in nature. So, Teen Titans Go was meant to be a comedy, and it was immediately loathed by the majority of the fandom, or geek culture, or people online, or however you want to put it. And yeah, I will cop to being one of those. I look back on some of my reactions to Teen Titans Go back in the day, and I definitely overdid it, which is not to say I like the show. I don't. I've probably watched all total maybe about 22 episodes of the show, which may sound like a lot until you realize that across its 5 seasons, there have been 213 episodes. No, really. Now, to be fair, Teen Titans Go is one of those shows, as has become very popular among animated series these days, where they do about 11-minute episodes, as it were. They did to do 11-minute stories with an average half-hour episode, maybe, or 22-minute episode, however you want to put it, consisting of 2 or 3 different segments. So when I say 200-plus episodes, 213, keep in mind, we're not talking 213 22-minute episodes. Still, that's a lot. That's a lot by pretty much any standard, and if you're not familiar with the show, as you can probably tell, that means Teen Titans Go is pretty popular with a significant number of people, specifically the target audience, which is younger kids, probably talking preteens and younger. That was always meant to be the primary audience for the show, and for that audience, this show works really well, and it's not surprising why, because Teen Titans Go is a series that just throws anything at the wall and sees what sticks. Kind of like monkeys, and we all know what monkeys throw. But okay, I'm sorry, I promise not to overdo it, because truthfully, I don't hate Teen Titans Go, not anymore. I hated it when it first came out, like a lot of people, and that was because of what it wasn't. And that's not really fair. Now, what it wasn't was the original series, and what it also wasn't was Young Justice, a very popular animated series that was definitely the antithesis of Teen Titans Go. It was a serious, not without a sense of humor, but a serious take on the characters of the DC universe, specifically the younger characters, many of which had appeared in different versions in Teen Titans. One of the main characters, especially at the start of Young Justice, was Robin, after all, and Robin is a big character in Teen Titans and Teen Titans Go as well. The other problem is that Teen Titans Go started on the air right around the time Young Justice was canceled. And Young Justice had a very passionate following, and a lot of people at the time basically blamed Teen Titans Go for Young Justice getting canceled, which is ridiculous. It's utterly ridiculous. Nobody directly associated with the production of Teen Titans Go, by which I mean directors, writers, things like that. Certainly not the voice actors. None of those people have anything to do with Young Justice getting canceled. It's not like the creators, the developers of Teen Titans Go went to Cartoon Network and said, "Now listen here, we'll give you a new animated series that will make you lots of money, but only if you first kill Young Justice." No, obviously that's silly, that's stupid. But, unfortunately, the conflation of this show coming on the air while the other show left has stuck, and a lot of people basically have an irrational hatred for Teen Titans Go, which is unfortunate because there's plenty of rational reasons not to like Teen Titans Go. I could go on about it, but that's not really the point of this episode. But what is relevant to what we will be talking about in a little bit is that I think that the biggest problem with Teen Titans Go is it's a series without any stakes. Now, I can already hear fans of the show going, wait, Shaun, you're not being fair. It's a comedy. What does it need with stakes? Well, okay, hypothetical individual who has just suddenly, bluntly and rather rudely, I may say, interjected themselves into this essay, review, whatever you want to call it. Stakes absolutely matter in comedy. Hell, I'd argue they matter a great deal more in comedy than almost any other place. Stakes are important. You have to care about what's happening, and you have to care about the characters on the screen. Now, okay, let me be very clear. Care is not the same thing as like. One of the best comedies of the last 20 years is unquestionably It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. This is a brilliant piece of black comedy, which admittedly I haven't watched in quite a while, because you have to understand, Sunny's been running since 2005, and it's still running today. It's a long-running show in its own right, and eventually, I moved on. There were other things. This was not necessarily a criticism of the show itself. Point is, I really loved those early seasons of It's Always Sunny, and I don't think the show has gotten particularly bad or anything. I just kind of wanted to watch other things. And that is a show where everybody on it is absolutely awful. All the characters are terrible human beings. That's the point. It is this very dark, very cynical, very deliberately nasty, uncomfortable show. That's what it's going for. But even though you may not like the characters in Sunny, you can't help but care about them. Or if you prefer, you can't help but find them compelling, interesting leads. They're fun, in quotation marks, to watch for a given value of that term. It's intriguing to watch them. It's engaging. Or let's use a different example. Let's talk about the Looney Tunes. Let's talk about Bugs Bunny. Let's talk about Daffy Duck. Now, these are not necessarily the deepest characters in all of fiction, but they're very compelling to watch. You think about modern Daffy, which is a very different take on the classic, wacky, bouncing all over the walls Daffy, the one who actually lived up to his name. I prefer later, modern, whatever you want to call him, classic nowadays, because he's been around far longer. I think, who I tend to think of as real Daffy, is more interesting, but, your mileage may vary, and there's no judgment here for that. But you take classic Daffy as we know him, he's basically the ultimate loudmouth loser who always gets himself into trouble because he just can't settle for good enough. His eyes are always bigger than his stomach, and it just gets him into trouble again and again. And arguably he's not necessarily that likable, but he's really compelling. And then you take somebody like Bugs Bunny, who is the ultimate quiet badass. I know, you may not think of Bugs that way, but that's always how I saw him growing up. He's the guy who never starts trouble, but always finishes it. You mess with Bugs, 99% of the time, you're not going to be happy with what happens. Neither of these characters are necessarily very deep, and rarely are their individual cartoons, particularly deep, or emotional, or whatever you want to put it. But they are very compelling. Now, there's a lot of reasons the best of the Looney Tunes are compelling. Of course, there's the animation, there's timing. My God, is there timing. There's pacing. There's all these things. But ultimately, it's also because you can't help but care about these characters. There are stakes to your average, really good Looney Tunes cartoon. I realize average, really good may sound like an oxymoron, but there's so many of them. I don't know how else to describe it. You care about whether or not that coyote is going to catch that roadrunner. Deep down in your heart of hearts, you know he isn't. And even if he did, it's not going to go well for him. He's never going to, on screen, break the roadrunner's neck and devour him. At least, dear God, I hope not. I don't know about you, but I never want to see that. But that doesn't make it any less compelling in the best Roadrunner Coyote cartoons. It's the tension. It's the tension of, okay, how is it going to mess up this time? How is it all going to fall apart? How is he going to blow it? How is the universe, the unfair, uncaring universe, going to screw over the coyote this time? And that tension makes for delightful, wonderful entertainment. That's because you care, and because you care, there are stakes. The problem with Teen Titans Go is, the majority of the episodes don't feature anything resembling actual stakes. Because the show is so determined to be a parody of superheroing, and because the show is based off another series that was largely comedic at times itself, the original Teen Titans animated series had any number of straight-out comedy episodes. It was a show that often engaged in super deformed and sight gags and face palm and all sorts of, wonderful silliness. One of the biggest differences between Teen Titans and Young Justice, beyond just the animation style, is just their approach to storytelling. It's not that Young Justice never had humor, but it was definitely a much more straight-on drama. Teen Titans was a hybrid of drama, action, and comedy. And so that kind of gives you a problem when you're trying to take that as the basis for your straight-out wacky comedy series. Honestly, Teen Titans Go would have probably been better served by just doing something completely different. Keep the Teen Titans name if you have to for recognition value, but I would have used different characters. I would have kept the voice actors, because the voice actors behind the Titans, I want to be clear, whatever problems are with Go, Teen Titans Go has one of the best voice casts ever. The 5 leads are wonderful. They're some of the most well-known. Go look up the leads. Go look up the people who voice the characters in Teen Titans. Chances are 90%, 99% of cartoons out there that you know about or that you watch today have these guys show up in one form or another, either as guest stars or as major characters or multiple major characters. They're some of the most respected, voice actors in their field, some of the most respected people in their field, and they're very passionate about the whole Teen Titans thing, both the original and Go, and I can't blame them. They seem to be legitimately close-knit, and they do everything the creators ask of them and more. It's not their fault that I don't think Teen Titans Go largely works. I think the problem is that either Teen Titans Go is too short or it's too long. Like, maybe it would work better if the episodes were actually the length of old Looney Tunes cartoons, like 6-7 minutes instead of 11 minutes, so that they had less time to get in their own way and they'd have to be more focused. Or maybe it would work better if they were 20 minutes long, because of what I've seen of Teen Titans Go, there's only one set of episodes that I actually think are legitimately good, and that's a mini-series they did, a 4 or 5 part mini-series called The Night Begins to Shine, which is based off, one of the characters has this beloved song, which is a fake song from the 80s. It's a real song, and it's very catchy, but it wasn't really written in the 80s. But it has this whole, it's actually from an actual fake 80s band, like a band that a guy who created the song, independent of the series, and it was eventually incorporated in, created this whole backstory for the band behind it that isn't real and doesn't exist. But the song, this 4-part episode plays into that, using a deliberately, basically the characters get sucked into another dimension where an evil dragon wants to steal the song. I know, it's comic books. Honestly, even in a serious comic book series, that wouldn't be that weird in terms of plot. So the characters have to fight back and get the song back. And when they're in this other dimension, they have an animation style that's completely different from the normal series. And it's very heavily based off of and using inspiration from 80s, especially the over-the-top neon aesthetic that's become very associated with a particular view of the 80s. It's all exaggerated over the top, but it's really bright and colorful, and the longer running time allows the show to actually do things that normally can't do. It allows the show to actually have a couple of decent action sequences. It allows the show to give some things weight. Yes, it's silly weight. Yes, the drama, as it were, is very silly, but it actually takes some of it seriously for a bit, and it works wonders for the series. It gives the show stakes. There's no reason that a show can't be relentlessly funny and silly and still have stakes. One of my all-time favorite series is Futurama. That was a show that was incredibly willing to do, to break the rules of its own self just for a quick sight gag. But at the same time, it took its characters seriously, except when it didn't. And it's also infamous online for making people cry again and again, and for its wonderful ability to mix high drama with high comedy, and low comedy with low drama. That's the brilliance of what comedy can do when it's working. And the problem is, a lot of times, I think the 11-minute runtime for Teen Titans Go prevents it from really ever hitting a groove. It's not crazy enough to be able to just be outright insane, but it's not restrained enough to do anything resembling actual character development or stuff like that. And I know this because I've seen Teen Titans Goes to the movie, and that movie is terrific. Like, seriously, even if you think you hate Teen Titans Go, I would recommend go give the movie a shot. It's in theaters right now as it's recording, and it's worth seeing. It's, as Movie Bob put it, basically a PG Deadpool. And it is exactly what it's trying to be, and exactly what Teen Titans Go is always trying to be. And it's not an accident. It's an 88 or 80 minute, they have a short in front of it. It's much longer than your average episode, basically. And much like The Night Begins to Shine, it also has room for actual action, for drama, for emotion. Yes, it's all played very silly. The central plot is about Robin wanting to star in his own movie. So we're clearly in kind of silly wink-wink, nudge-nudge territory. But it treats that desire I don't want to say seriously, but it treats it with at least some weight. It makes it important to the characters so that even when they're doing the most insane things, like traveling back in time to erase all other superheroes so they can get their own movie, it actually works. And the last act is actually just really works as a last act to a superhero film while still relentlessly mocking such things. I think Teen Titans Goes to the movie is really fun, and much like Night Begins to Shine, it plays with animation styles, and it has a lot of musical numbers. Again, you're starting to see that there are elements that could make this show work, and I don't think it's an accident. Those elements also get more of a chance to come out and play when the show does something longer form. All of which, at long last, brings us to Rise of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
You are about to be part of an experiment that will change the very nature of humanity.
This can't be good.
This represents a new level of mutant ability.
Let's play!
Unleash the flavor.
Capture those specimens!
So, you guys from Jersey?
Someday you will be great ninjas.
Time to put our training to use.
What training? You guys have been training?
It's go time!
We're getting nowhere fighting these guys.
Hey, yo! How about we take the glowy ones?
Okay, guys. This is our moment.
Let's go out and bust some bad guys.
We're gonna be heroes!
Smash and dash! Cowabunga! Let's do it!
Ah, boy.
Okay, so if you're not familiar with this is the latest entry in the long-running, very popular Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles franchise, which goes back to the 80s and has existed across comic books, movies, and of course, cartoon shows. And also a live-action TV show, but in the words of Teen Titans Go, we don't talk about that. Seriously, we don't talk about that. So, Rise of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles faces a lot of hurdles it has to overcome, not least of which that the previous series, simply called Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, often shorted to the 2012 or Turtles 2012 or Turtles 12 by fans, the 2012 series just completed its run in November of 2017, and Rise of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is officially premiering following the release of its initial episode. We'll get back to that in a second. It's officially beginning its run September 2018. So, not even a year is going between the start of this series and the end of the previous. Now, there have been a long history of multiple versions of the Turtles, as I said, TV. Before the 2012 series, there was a series in 2003, and it ran for about 7 seasons, including a often controversial spin-off, as these things go, but regardless, 7 seasons. It ended in 2009. So it got a 3 or 4 year gap between shows. Now, in that time, also, the Turtles license, Turtles was bought out by Nickelodeon, or licensed? I think Nickelodeon owns it now. Anyways, doesn't really matter for the purposes of this conversation. Regardless, Nickelodeon airs it now, Nickelodeon has it now, Nickelodeon is the one who's doing it. Really, it's Paramount and all that. Anyways, Turtles has a new owner, and this new owner is clearly very invested in keeping Turtles around. I can't help but wonder if the recent live-action reboot had done better, the live-action movie reboots. Maybe they wouldn't have felt the need to so quickly rush another series out. Regardless, less than a year is not a lot of time, to say the least. Now, to be fair, the new show has been in production for longer than that. It started a couple years ago. It was revealed to the public in October 2017, shortly before the ending of the new series, but it had been in production for longer than that. And so, still, part of the problem is that the 2012 series was very, very popular. And it left a strong mark on fans. It left a strong mark on adult fans, kid fans. It was popular, and it did a really good job. It started out doing somewhat of its own thing. The first season largely eschewed familiar villains and only included familiar faces in very different, dramatically different ways, before eventually moving on to adapt in its own way many of the familiar, popular storylines and characters of the comics and the show that came before it, which is something the 2003 series did as well. The biggest difference, well, there's a lot of differences between those two shows, but one of the biggest is that the 2012 series was CGI, while the 2003 used more traditional animation. And between those two shows, you have straight, as it were, serious takes on the Ninja Turtles locked down really strongly. Those two series are both classics. If you're fans of the Turtles and you've not watched one or the other, you absolutely should. They are worth searching out. Obviously, they've got their good episodes, they've got their bad episodes, but overall, both the 2003 and 2012 series were very well done and definitely are well remembered by fans. So if you're going to have to produce yet another animated series, it's a complete reboot and restart. And you didn't need to, but you have to, because that's what Nickelodeon wants. Really, the only sensible thing to do is to take a completely different direction, which is what Rise of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles does. It is a completely new approach to the Turtles. Well, not completely. You still have Leonardo, Raphael, Donatello, Michelangelo, four turtle brothers who are mutants, who were raised by their master/father, Splinter, and whose best human friend is April O'Neil. But while the names are the same, the characterizations and personalities and backstories very much are not. One of the biggest differences is the fact that Raphael, long common, the hothead, the loner, he's now the leader. And Leonardo, long the self-serious leader, who admittedly the last series, the 2012 series, did do a little bit of a twist on by making him a bit of a geek. Somebody who was like a big Star Trek, or that series version Star Trek fan, somebody who idolized superheroes, somebody who really was trying to lean into that. But they've gone an even more dramatically different take on Leonardo. This time, he's described by the show as the self-proclaimed coolest brother and the self-professed trickster, who thinks one-liners will fire up the team. So, that's different. He's also voiced by Ben Schwartz, and if you don't know who Ben Schwartz is, educate yourself. He is a wonderful, amazing actor, among other things, being on The Greatest Show, a major recurring character on the greatest show in the history of television, Parks and Recs, Fight Me, I Will Take You Down, and also voicing one of the nephews in the recently running, and equally quite very good, DuckTales reboot. So, Ben Schwartz has no lack of experience with animated reboots at this point. So, you have very different takes on these characters, and it goes further than that. There is no Shredder in this. Now, to be fair, the Shredder took a while to become a major threat in the 2012 series as well, but he ultimately was there as a background element, and he did eventually take a central stage. And he still ran the Foot Clan and all that. In this version, the main villain is Baron Draxum, voiced by, of all people, John Cena, and he is a mystical mutant warrior from a hidden city beneath the earth, who is also known as the Maker of Mutants, and is determined to mutate all of humanity into mutants, which is very different motivation, and the Foot Clan works for him. And they have teleportation powers, and they either are or control origami ninjas. We haven't actually seen them yet. And are you starting to get the picture? This is deliberately a very different take, but it goes even further than that. Because unlike the previous series, and like Teen Titans Go, Rise is dividing itself largely up into 11-minute segments. The first season is going to be 26 episodes, which equals out to about 52 segments. So, the show is already starting to resemble Go in that way. Although, to be fair, the 11-minute segment thing has become very popular among animation in general. A lot of shows, a lot of great shows are doing that as well. That's not automatically a problem. It certainly hasn't hurt Steven Universe, for example. But the other thing about Rise of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is, it's, in addition to very different personalities, it's taking a very different visual approach, really redesigning the boys, which... Okay, for the most part, I actually personally have to cop to really liking the redesigns. The only one I can't stand is Splinter. I hate his redesign, and what little we see of him in the first episode doesn't impress me either. He's the biggest liability to the show just based on the first episode, but we'll get back to that in a second. Beyond the redesigns, and April has also been redesigned smartly. They've kept her a teenage girl, which is something the 2012 series, an idea they introduced, and I think makes so much sense. It's amazing they didn't do it from the start. And also, something the new show is keeping that the 2012 series was the first to really do, is that these boys are teenagers. In the 2003 series, in the comics, even in the 87 cartoon, as goofy as it was, the Turtles never really felt like the teenagers that make up part of their name. The 2012 series went a long way to changing that and really playing up that aspect. And that's something Rise is trying to do as well. And it works well with Rise because here we come to the last big controversial thing. Rise is explicitly more comedic than what we usually get from Turtles. Arguably, it's even more comedic than the 84 series, which, the 84 series was just, it was a product of its time. Like, it was comedic, but it wasn't necessarily 87. I'm sorry, did I say 84? 87 series, sorry. Don't send me lots of texts or emails or whatever. I are in the comments. 87. Anyways, it was comedic, and definitely later on in the run it started to play into that, but a lot of that was also just a product of the time. This is an outright comedy, but it's an action comedy. So that's important. Teen Titans Go is largely just a comedy. It's not trying to be anything else. And even worse, it's a comedy, one of those comedies where everything resets at the end of the episode, where status quo is God, where everything is the same by the end of the episode, where everything reverts back to the way it was, where basically there's absolutely no room for development of character, of storylines, of ideas. Maybe you have a few reoccurring elements that come in as gags or sequels to past episodes or things like that. But basically, it's all very much what I like to call potato chip television. It's not bad necessarily, and I get why the audience likes it, but it doesn't do anything for them either. It's not in any ways particularly deeper, and it's not that comedy has to be super deep or has to have higher aspirations, but I think you can still be really funny. I think you could still be very, very embracing the anarchy and the insanity, but also try and have real characterization and development. Look at shows like Archer. Look at shows like Futurama. Look at any number of wonderful, amazing comedies that have still had ongoing elements and haven't just allowed status quo to be God. And this is one of the reasons I'm hopeful for Rise, because while the show is largely going to be more standalone episodes, each episode will more generally stand alone than some of the past shows have, there will still be ongoing plot lines. There will still be development. And based on this first episode, Mystic Mayhem, which is aired on Nickelodeon back on July 20th and is available on Nickelodeon's YouTube right now. You can go online and watch the whole episode yourself right now. And I strongly recommend you do. Not just because I am ultimately cautiously recommending the show, but just because I think it's a good idea to try things out on yourself, to decide for yourself. The job of a critic like me is not just to simply give you a bald-faced thumbs up, thumbs down, go see it. If that was all I need to do, this video would be 30 seconds, and it's very much not 30 seconds. I personally agree, and with a lot of people, a lot of my peers, who think that criticism should try to be a bit more, and that's what I'm trying to do in these videos. So, I do, but yes, I do, overall, when I watched the first episode of Teen Titans Go back in the day, I automatically could tell this was not the show for me. Now, to be fair, I did give it a few more episodes. You know, lots of shows have taken a while to get going. And then I was, after about episode 4, I was like, yeah, no. And then I checked in periodically. That's why I've watched the show at all, to see if it ever really, I don't want to necessarily got better, although, yeah, I do think got better is partially the right term, but really more, if it became something that might interest me, because in this world of peak television, it's really hard to tell anybody to watch something if they don't absolutely love it, or at the very least, unabashedly like it. And I didn't either of those for Teen Titans Go. So, yeah. Rise, when I was done with this first episode, I thought, there's potential here. Is it perfect? Absolutely not. It's a comedy, and that means, for one thing, not all the jokes land. At least not for me. And that's the nature of comedy. That's why comedy is so much harder, I think, than any other form. I think it's much harder than drama or horror, because there's a universality to drama or horror or action or science fiction or fantasy. There are certain universal ideas and themes that, while maybe don't appeal the same to everybody, do appeal to a much larger percentage than something like comedy, which is incredibly subjective. But again, I thought there was potential here. Yes, they're leaning heavy on the comedy, but that makes sense. Like I said, we've already had the previous two series, the previous two long-running series for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, did the more dramatic, serious approach, and did them incredibly well. There's not room for a third series, especially with no gap really between the last one and this one, to do the same thing. They needed to take a different approach, and there's nothing that says Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles can't be done as a comedy. Like, boys and girls, I don't know if you know this, but the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles comic, the first comic, was a parody. It was a parody of Daredevil. That's the real why they're called the Foot, because Daredevil's longtime ninja enemies are the Hand. You get it? Daredevil's master was Stick, so the Turtles' master was Splinter. Hell, in the original comic, the mutation, the stuff that mutates them, is the same chemical that blinds Daredevil, and it's Daredevil's accident where he saves the guy that causes the kid to drop the turtles in the first place. The whole thing is one giant parody of Daredevil, and that's why also in the first issue of Ninja Turtles, Shredder dies after 2 panels. He's a joke villain, who they eventually brought back or repurposed and developed as more, but he started out as a joke villain. The whole series was a joke. It was meant to be a one-shot. They had no idea, the creators at the time, what was going to come from it. They had no idea that Eastman and Laird had no expectation that they would create something that would become a major pop culture icon. So don't sit there and say there's no room for the idea of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles as a comedy. There absolutely is. Now, maybe this particular version of that comedy doesn't appeal to you or won't appeal to you, and if not, fair enough. I'm not going to judge anybody for not liking something like this. And I'm not sitting here telling you I think the first episode of Rise is perfect. Far from it. But this first episode, which is really 2 segments put together, so you get a bit of a longer episode to establish everything, it has potential, and it has potential for a number of reasons. For one thing, while it is a comedy, there's actually really good action. Like, one of my big problems with Go is a lot of the average episodes, there's no room for any kind of fun action beats. Not just really cool badass action, just fun. I often find the sight gags and the staging and the pacing in the show struggles. I thought Rise, this first episode, does a lot better job. Like, the episode opens with what seems to be the boys about to go out and attack a group of mobsters on top of a roof. Like, they send out a grappling hook and they're sliding down and it looks like they're about to drop down on some bad guys, but then they slide past them to the next building and they actually drop down into a giant pool. They're not there to fight bad guys because in this version, Splinter has never taught them how to be ninjas. They're self-taught as the series opens. He doesn't start training them until the big bad guy, Baron Draxon, reveals himself. Well, at least that's what they say is going to happen. Again, the first episode doesn't actually show that, and I've only seen the first episode. But apparently the idea is going to be that Splinter never trained them, and he only starts as the show progresses, which is an interesting idea. It does fit with this more humorous take on Splinter, which, again, I'm not entirely sold on yet, but I'll give him a shot. But I do like that as an idea that these are self-taught versions of the boys, and that they have natural potential, and that's kind of where they capture some of the old Leonardo and the new Leonardo, where he has the most natural ability, but they are not badass warriors yet. They just happen to have certain abilities because they're mutant turtles. And they end up going up against another mutant, Baron Draxon, and that's another thing that bodes well for the show. While Draxon does get a few comedic beats, the show does, in this episode, largely play him serious, and between a really effective design and pretty good voice work from Josh Cena, he's legitimately intimidating. He comes off as for a kid's show, okay? I'm not saying I wasn't scared to watch myself, and I don't think most adults will be, but you can look at this character and go, yeah, okay, he's a legitimate threat. I can see that he could be a real danger to our heroes. He's smart, he's intelligent, but he's also strong. He's a powerful fighter in and of itself. He apparently rules this whole city, and there are hints, there are lines of dialogue that hint at a larger connection between him and the boys, between him and mutants in general, which makes sense. And it's clear that Splinter's going to know something about him. It works. It works to establish Draxon as an effective threat who can be an ongoing issue for the boys, while also still fitting in with this new take on the series and doing something different. doing something new. I like that Draxum is a complete departure from what we've seen before, and I think for the most part, again, just based on this first episode, he largely works. I like this new take on April, who's a lot brasher, a lot more, one of the guys, really, basically. When the show opens, like, one of the smart things I think the show does is it doesn't open with an actual origin. I'm sure we'll get an origin episode eventually, but by all accounts, at least the first 6 or 7 episodes aren't going to dive too deeply into the guys' origin beyond establishing certain key points. And that's good, because I don't think we really need to. Everybody knows their origin at this point. And I like that we don't waste a lot of time. April's already their friend, and the implication is she's been their friend for quite a while. And I like that. I like that she's willing to get her hands dirty just as much as the guys. And I like the idea that they're going to train and we're going to get to see them develop. I think there's still room for the show to be epic, as it were, which is a word that's overused at times, but still. And what we get, the action sequences, the big action climax of this episode works. It's well paced, it's well set up, it's well shot, it's well animated. Again, I understand this animation style, this approach isn't going to be everybody's cup of tea, and I don't love every single redesign, but overall it's fluid. It allows for really high-paced energy and action, which I think is very important, and it helps give the show a bit more action edge instead of just being the straight-out comedic designs of, say, Teen Titans Go. And overall, that's the point I'm trying to make, is I think this is a much stronger start, and I'm pretty optimistic from where we go from here. Who knows? Maybe I'll be wrong. Maybe by episode 5 or 6, I'll be having to come back onto YouTube or wherever I'll be posting and say, okay, I was totally wrong. I was totally mistaken. This show is utter garbage. I bow down before all the haters. You were right. I was wrong. But I don't think so. And considering the fact that Nickelodeon's already renewed the show for a second season of another 26 episodes, they clearly don't think so either. And the premiere's ratings were pretty good for a Nickelodeon show, relative to the ratings they generally get. The ratings weren't anything great in larger terms, but for Nickelodeon and for an original Nickelodeon show, the first episode, especially considering it was kind of airing out of the blue, did well. So I think basically you better get used to it for the foreseeable future. Rise of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is the face of Ninja Turtles, especially while the movie series begins to reboot and begins to work its way through that again, which means we could be at least another 2 or 3 years out from another live-action movie. The comics are brilliant, by the way, and if you're looking for that darker, more mature take, go check out the long-running IDW comic, which I think is up to, issue 75 at this point. It's really great. It's doing a lot of different things, too. Right now, for instance, the boys have had a complete schism with Splinter, who has killed Shredder, taken over the Foot Clan, and is running them like a ninja clan in New York City, taking over gangs, taking over the mob, and becoming something that the boys don't like, and they've completely broken ties with him, and that's a neat take in and of itself. But regardless, I'm willing to give Rise a chance. It's interesting. It's different. And if it doesn't work, well, you know what? I've already had 2 really great animated series based on the Turtles that did compelling, serious, more dramatic action. I am willing to give something new a try. I'm willing to see if this something new can work. And based on this first episode, I think the creators are not simply just doing the same mistakes that Teen Titans Go did. Now, that's not to say they haven't made their own mistakes. Like, by making Leonardo more of a jokester, they have, for example, weakened Michelangelo as a character. Like, by the end of this first episode, Leo, Raph, Donatello, April, and Baron Draxum are all pretty well established. They all have well established personalities and character, and you can look at them by the end of the episode and go, okay, I get who they are, at least as we're starting out. Michelangelo feels a lot more nebulous. The idea is maybe they're trying to play up he's more of an artist this time around, and he's a prankster, jokester, while Leonardo's a trickster. But honestly, you can call it what you want. They basically have similar overlap. And Leonardo already feels more compelling thanks to, no offense to the voice actor for Michelangelo, who's perfectly decent and a perfectly workmanlike actor with a perfectly respectable history, but he's no Ben Schwartz, and Ben Schwartz is already threatening to steal every scene he's in. So I can already see overlap between them, and I suspect Leo will tend to get the focus. I could see a version of Go where it's very good, and all the other characters get a lot of development and work very well, but Michelangelo largely remains a background player underdeveloped. I don't know, I'm hoping I'm wrong, but I think at the very least they're going to need to figure out something to make Michelangelo more distinct. But, this is the first episode, and it's no crime to take a bit of time to find yourself as a TV series. God only knows I've seen worse first episodes. Cough, Star Trek Next Generation. Cough, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. So, yeah. Overall, I enjoyed the first episode of Rise of the Teenage Ninja Turtles. I recommend go check it out on YouTube if you haven't already. And try and keep an open mind. If you don't like it, fair enough. The world won't end if you don't watch Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles for a while. Not everything has to be made for everyone. But overall, I'm coming away fairly happy and intrigued. And that's going to do it for this episode. So until next time, for Unrepentant Geeking, I'm Shaun Cronenfeld, wishing you all long days and pleasant nights.